Well, it's very hard to be following Emma, but good morning. When I first started thinking about my senior speech, I thought about a number of different potential topics. I realized that I could write this speech about music and what it means to me, or I could write it about rowing and how it's helped me to grow as a person. I could write it about mental health and its utmost importance and prevalence here at Brooks and in society, or I could write about the relationships I have formed here. Any one of these things would be true and telling of my 4 years on this campus. Instead, I decided to address all of these things by answering a very simple question that I am often asked. Why are you so busy? I always give the short answer, because I like to be. And that's true because I do. But the reason for my packed schedule goes so much further than what I would explain when I am asked this while sitting at dinner or walking down Main Street. The first year of my Brooks career is what I would like to call a growth period. During my first week at Brooks, I managed to survive solely off of oatmeal and plain pasta, to break the ice cream machine, and to run into a moving truck with my body on Main Street. Needless to say, I was a bit of a mess. So over the course of that year, I was definitely searching for myself and for my passions. I lived by convenience, whether it be choosing who to hang out with, what sports to do, or what to do in my free time. I was definitely not the most ambitious of freshmen, but I still felt like my days were jam-packed and I was moving at 100 miles per hour. I didn't love that feeling. I often felt out of control and that I wasn't getting the most out of my time. I still loved Brooks, but not to the extent that I would later come to learn. Over time, I began to experience these shifts in different areas of my life. The first of these was in athletics. During sophomore year, I decided to join the Brooks rowing team. Rowing was something I was familiar with, but I was hesitant at first. I was still operating a little bit by my freshman year philosophy of comfort. I had played lacrosse that year since it was more familiar to me at the time, so switching was nerve-wracking. I can confidently say that this switch ended up being one of the best choices I've made. My sophomore season was far from successful, as we managed to beat just one other boat over the course of the entire spring. However, this was the gateway into the sport that would come to help me grow as a person and shape my character. On the first day of classes junior year, we had a team meeting. I don't think any of us knew at that time that this was the beginning of the complete overhaul of Brooks rowing that was going to occur over the course of the following year. At that meeting, we talked about how things were going to be different, beginning with entering 2 boats into the head of the Charles that fall. We would be having on-the-water practices during September and October, which we had never done before, in order to prepare for the race. In late October, we packed up 2 boats and went into Boston for the regatta. If you're not familiar with it, the Head of the Charles is the world's largest rowing regatta, and it's held right in Boston. Everyone from high schoolers to Olympians from all over the world race there over a 2-day period each fall. The race was fun, but the part of the day that stuck with me the most was when we chatted with Ellie Logan, a 2006 Brooks graduate and 3-time Olympic gold medal winner. Speaking with her about her experiences was encouraging and inspiring, and even though she has done and seen so much in the years since she graduated, she expressed how connected she still feels to Brooks, asking us about how certain teachers and places on campus were doing. No matter who you are, it's pretty cool to meet someone who is wildly successful in their field, who is once exactly where you are. From the week before Thanksgiving break until the season began the week before spring break, we put in countless hours and meters in the tanks. However, in the spring, we began to see the point of all of this. The first race of the spring, which everyone can fondly remember, can only be described as brutal. It was around 35 or 40 degrees and windy. And the only thing that I can liken the conditions of the water to is that Japanese painting of the huge wave, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can see it on the wall of Mr. Smith's classroom between the 2 windows. Due to these conditions, the coaches ended up altering the race course so that we raced along the far shore of the lake and decided that if anyone was going to race that day, it would be the first and second boats. We set out to race Southfield. The race itself was definitely not our best, and we probably looked like a mess, but we won. Upon return to the dock, our boat was filled with water up past our feet, and Emma, Claire, Lindsay, Bella, and I all had borderline hypothermia. But that was the beginning of a huge season for us. Unlike the past, we began to win, and even when we lost, it was by smaller margins than ever before. We went from not qualifying for New England's sophomore year to qualifying all varsity boats and placing fourth in first boat in the span of a year, which is pretty unreal. So as I moved deeper into the sport of rowing and began to see the payoff, I was definitely still busy, but it was beginning to feel like it was a different kind of busy, where I felt satisfied instead of overwhelmed. I loved that feeling, so I made myself more open to it. During winter term of my junior year, I received a text from Max Curry asking me to help him music direct the show he would be directing that spring. He told me about the opportunity and how it would involve organizing all aspects of the music for the show. I would be responsible for teaching everyone the songs and harmonies, getting a band together, and playing piano and conducting at the performances. I was beyond nervous about this, as this was a side of music I had never before been involved in. I've played a lot of instruments over my childhood, and even with such a musical upbringing and all this prior knowledge, I had absolutely no idea how I was going to approach this task. Regardless of my nerves, I responded enthusiastically to Max, expressing how excited I was to work on the show, which I was. Over the coming week, we held auditions, cast the show, and set off for break ready to begin rehearsals when we returned. I spent all of my free time over spring break practicing the piano part, and when we came back, I was ready to go. We began the process of putting this show together. Over the course of the spring, I juggled the demanding schedule of about 2.5 to 3 hours committed to rowing, followed by eating as fast as I could and then rushing to rehearsal for the next 1 to 2 hours. There was simply no free time, but I loved it. I was taking part in two of the things I am most passionate about in the world and felt that I was growing in both while still excelling in other areas, such as school. The night of the final show, it all came together. There was one song in the show that we had consistently had an issue with. During that song, the whole cast sang and danced wildly all around the theater, and often because of this, they would miss the entrance for the repeat of the second chorus. When we were approaching this part, I got so nervous. I wanted so badly for us to nail it since it was the final show, so from my seat behind the piano, I made sure that the band was together before turning toward the cast and making eye contact with everyone I could to attempt to telepathically remind them not to mess up. The band built up intensity into that entrance, and finally, the entire cast came in at the right time. For whatever reason, this one moment made the hours upon hours we had put into this show all worth it. Honestly, I don't remember much else from these performances, but this moment is something that has stuck with me as the moment I realized that this was something I truly loved to do. That spring was when I had this epiphany. Being so busy in these new and different ways allowed me to be happier. Every night when I went to bed, I felt pleased with all I had accomplished that day, even if it meant consistently doing homework into the early hours of the morning and not getting the proper amount of sleep each night. Looking back on my 4 years at Brooks, this was one of my favorite times and the most productive and meaningful seasons I've had here, and is also one reason why I'm so excited for this spring when, as Hannah mentioned, I will be music directing another show with Kate. These two shifts in my life have brought me to seek out more opportunities in these areas, which is part of the reason I am so excited for the last few months I have on this campus. Right now, the class of 2018 is 116 days away from Prize Day by my math and moving on to the next chapter of our lives. But there is so much that stands between where we are right now, listening to me talk in chapel on a random Thursday morning in February, and when we will receive our diplomas. For this class, this is our last semester as Brooks students, our final athletic season wearing a Brooks uniform. This will be our last semester of dress code, Spirit Saturdays, tri-weekly chapel services, and having rules like when to check in. It will be filled with walks to the boathouse and along the fire trail and exploring all corners of this campus. They will contain soaking up these moments with our closest friends, doing whatever it is we like to do. For me, it will be all of these things in my own way. After this, I will never again row on this lake. I will never be involved in another Brooks Theater production. And I will never again take the stage with District Malo, Chamber Ensemble, or any other Brooks music group. The way that I'm putting this, it sounds so sad, but I think I speak for our whole class when I say that the feelings about this coming semester truly encompass the meaning of the word bittersweet. For me, all of these things played a huge role in what I will be doing after I graduate. When looking at colleges, I looked for one that would allow me to continue to do all these things. And while I'm nervous about next year, I'm excited because I will be starting from scratch with building friendships and relationships in a brand new place with brand new people using the skills that I learned here. So how did I get to this point? The demands on my time hadn't changed, but there was something that had. I discovered the difference between busyness and having a full life. For the first half of my Brooks career, I was busy. I was always doing something, but I didn't care about any of it. When these shifts were occurring, when I was diving more deeply into activities and relationships that were meaningful, I began to move from being busy to having a full life. Now I find my days more fulfilling, and each day I'm happy about what I've accomplished. So to the freshmen here, you are going to have lots of these random pieces of advice thrown at you during senior speeches this spring. But seriously, listen to them. I wish I did when I was in your position. We may only have numbered days left, but if my math is correct, you have 1,216 days until you graduate, so use them wisely. You probably are, or were for much of the fall, extremely overwhelmed. You probably aren't quite used to having absolutely no free time and having so many hours of commitments outside of your classes. Over the next 4 years, find ways to turn your busyness into fulfillment. Pay attention to the difference between the activities, people, and choices that keep you busy and the ones that keep you fulfilled, and then find ways to do more of what gives you that full feeling. Once you find these passions, you will know for sure, and I promise you, you will feel happier. So whether you're graduating this year, you have another 3 years left, or you are a faculty member who has no plans of leaving anytime in the near future, we are all members of this community who have the same opportunity to learn and grow in this beautiful setting, to find our passions and to find what brings us joy. So don't let that opportunity pass. Thank you.